and again and again. And first of all, for me to identify the key leadership figures, your senior warden, Jeff Bell, junior warden, Rachel Maloney, David Getz, and Jim Newman with our Walking in the Neighborhood initiative. Just recently, Jim Rector and a team of 7 members and 4 staff put together a 9-page report to the vestry that the vestry approved that goes to the bishop for our regathering, and that group did that in a very short period of time. And then yesterday we had another food drive, and I think we had like 20 or 30 members. I don't have the update on that yet, making that possible. And additional outstanding work from our treasurer, Linda Kilmer, and really all the staff. It's just been remarkable. And I trust that you're noticing the gift of our music ministries and our worship videos, and the gifts of our communications director, Amy DeCalson, and her team in really making us just better and better and better in what we're doing online. Mostly on, I mean, for most of us, it's the worship that we see, but the team is doing a ministry all over the place, and on social media and our website. Erica, is Kate on vacation today? Is she not here?
She's not. She's yeah, got some family work she's doing.
Yeah. Okay. But Kate, other than this, every Zoom meeting I've been on with the parish, Kate's been the team making it happen behind the scenes. She's just done wonderful work. So there's no doubt I'm leaving some people out, but it's really important for me to do the best that I can to identify the people that are coming forward and helping us. I need to tell you that it's been the most challenging time of my rectorate, and I'm going to say some things this morning that I think will help us pop that into focus. I think anybody in a leadership position has been challenged perhaps more than ever in their leadership work. And so the reason I want to say that about me is that the team has come around us and helped us, and just keep coming to your rector, coming to me and saying, Jim, how can I help? How can I help? What do you need? And I cannot tell you how meaningful that's been for me. It's so let me get into the stuff that I want to talk about, and then I'll come back to that topic, because I think it's relevant to all of us. I'm not the only one that's weary in this time. I suspect we all are. And leadership responsibility has another level of weariness, but all of us have responsibilities, and the changes that are coming at us just make it wearisome. And that's why I want to start with thank you, because in the weariness, there's great gratitude, and there's great hope, and there's wonderful promise in my mind and heart for movement. And as I preached, I don't know, whenever it was a while back, life or God is stirring the pot. And that's an opportunity to grow. It's an opportunity to grow personally. It's an opportunity to grow as a society. It's an opportunity to grow as a church. So I immensely enjoyed Reverend Robert's sermon this morning, and Jeremiah and Hananiah and all that going on, and what a calamitous time in the history of Israel. And when the pot gets stirred, there's a chance to take new ground. And I'm very hopeful. This is a time for us to take new ground. So let me carry on. So first of all, I want to talk about our Welcoming the Neighborhood project. And again, David Getz and Jim Newman have continued to be the leaders of that. And by the way, I'm going to do some reading of things. There's too much material for me to just do it from memory. So I apologize. I'll be reading some of this. First, let me say that we continue to receive gifts to our capital campaign. We now have commitments of $3,456,000. Yay. I mean, that's just fantastic news. Thank you all. Blessed be God and bless you. And we're going to keep going. And the starting place, we hope to start this summer with a focus on the Children's Center. And that's going to mean new bathrooms, a new kitchen, new carpeting and flooring, new windows, new cabinetry and paint, and a new doorway out into the playground of the Children's Center. It'll mean a complete renovation of the children's playground area, which will include overhead lighting. It will also include a fabric shade structure. It will include fencing and beautiful landscaping around the fencing. It's going to increase the size of the playground for our children. It also will include extending the walkway. You know, the arched walkway, if you come out of the sanctuary and move actually north or south, you're under a walkway. Going north, we're going to extend that walkway all the way to the Children's Center. We're installing, I mean, of all the things, this is the one that it's infrastructure behind the scenes that you don't realize, but we're installing a new fiber optic cabling to Hutton Hall and the 3 education buildings. So there's a chance your phone might not work on our grounds, and there's a chance that when we do faith formation for any ages of all kinds, that we'll have access to internet resources there. And it also will include a new phone system. So it's wonderful work outlined for us. And that phase 1 is probably in the neighborhood of $1 million. The vestry approved a little more than that to get this work done. David Getz and Jim Newman are working with the various architects and construction, Redden Construction, to submit plans to the city. Now, the city's already approved it all. Now we have to get permits. So they have to add new things to submit for permitting. And we have a hope that all will be finished by September, and that we'll be able to get going then and complete the construction. I don't know, sometime, if all goes well, maybe by the end of 2020, if not within the first quarter of 2021. So if you've been around the church, you may have noticed it's hard to get there. The streets are under construction, and you have to be careful which direction you're going. And if you happen to go in the wrong direction, then you got to figure out how to reroute yourself. And so and during this COVID crisis, it's a great time to have our campus under construction. You can't get to it anyway, so why not do the building work now? So we're looking forward to that, and I'm very excited about reporting that to you. Secondly, I did mention about the work that Jim Rector and his team, Lee Kolstad, Judy Morrison, Taylor Bell, Jennifer Conley, Kevin Merritt, and John Farley did, along with Ann and Kate and Sarah Getz and Erica of the staff team. They submitted, I think it's a 9-page report to the vestry, and the last thing you want me to do is spend your time reading that report to you. So, and it kind of goes without saying that, help me Jesus, Maricopa County is the poster child for the world of how not to respond to COVID-19. I mean, that's just, I trust you've seen all that in the news. And the bishop, with a committee of medical professionals, designed the criteria by which we can regather. So the report that Jim Rector and his team put together is a response to the criteria the bishop laid out. And again, that's a team of members of the diocese that includes medical professionals and clergy and laity. And um, the first criteria is that we have 2 weeks of decreased diagnosed cases of COVID-19. And so that looks like it's not happening anytime soon. So on the one hand, we do have a plan for regathering. And on the other hand, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't know, not immediately. However, it's good to know that there really is a plan for regathering, and there really is an expectation for regathering. And that plan is 8 pages of how to keep us safe, how to organize it, how to make it work, and how to make it joyful. Now, I need to say something to all of us. And again, Erica, this is just not fun looking at myself. I want to see everybody. But anyway.
You want me to take you off for this?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. That's okay.
Okay.
Again, like from time to time, I say to you, I just wish it was you and I in your living room. I want to say to you, we're going to have the joy of worshiping together. And even as we do it, it'll be nothing like we've ever done before. We'll be worshiping with masks on. We'll be at least 6 feet apart from everyone. We will be asked questions when we enter the sanctuary. We will be directed to walk this way, not that way. We will be directed of how to get to a bathroom. How we're going to do communion is still not perfectly clear to us. When we begin, we can only begin with communion of one kind, and we might not start with that because we have so much to figure out that we're not sure right from the beginning we'll be able to do communion. Now, let me just add a little caveat. The bishop quoted Pharaoh. Pharaoh hears your complaint, and the bishop is offering some pastoral allowances for how we might be able to receive communion even now during phase 1. So we've just gotten those allowances from the bishop like Thursday, I think. We had a Zoom meeting with the bishop, and we're working on how that would work for us at St. Barnabas. And please know, we'll affect that as soon as we can possibly figure out what will work for our community. And again, understand that smaller communities can act a lot quicker than we can. The size of our community and just the number of members complicates it. But we're hopeful that we can be able to celebrate Eucharist, receiving the bread relatively soon. Erica, do you have a thought for the timing of that? I don't want to put you on the spot if you don't.
That's okay. The team is talking about the best way to do that. The bishop gave us a couple of options of how we might be able to offer the sacrament during this time. And so we are very excitedly working on providing that very soon.
Very soon means, do you have a thought for that?
Hopefully during July.
Hopefully in the month of July. Okay, great. Thank you. It's good for people to just understand that. So also, we cannot gather any group larger than 50 people. So we're going to be, our plan includes using the sanctuary, the music center, and Hutton Hall. By the way, not simultaneously. We're not sure about that by any stretch, but that we have several buildings we can use. Part of the challenge is whenever you've had a gathering, then you have to disinfect everything. I mean, you can't just gather again in 2 hours, maybe even a day, because everything has to be disinfected. So, and it's our intention to have Sunday services rotating around the normal schedules of 7:45, 10:15, and 10:21. Also have worship services during the week. We'll be doing some polling to figure out what's the best times for people. And our goal would be that we would be able to accommodate all the people that want to worship on a weekly basis. I'm not positive we can deliver that. By the way, there'll be registration to participate because of the limitations, and we're all going to need to make allowances. And this plan, once the diocese agrees or accepts our 8-page proposal, then it goes to an execution plan that will again take more work. And as that gets identified, then we'll communicate it with the parish. We'll put it on the website. We'll be able to send it out via email, and we'll have videos. I mean, all the ways you would imagine. We'll do everything we can to communicate it effectively. We'll put the plan up on around the grounds in the building. We'll have markings on the floor. We'll have lots of ushers and greeters and people helping us manage it. So we're going to make it as accessible as we possibly can. And we all need to understand that it will be different. And you can make it joyful. You can decide to be grateful and celebrate and allow yourself to rejoice in what we can have instead of getting lost in what we can't have. We all will have that decision before us. And I know we can make the decision, each one of us, to let it be a joyful, celebratory experience. And we might not be able to see each other's mouths, but we'll see the smile in our eyes when we pass the peace and when we look at one another and when we worship together. It will be a joyful time. We can make it such. Can I have an amen to that?
I'll say an amen on behalf of the gang.
Okay.
I'm seeing smiling faces.
Yeah.
I
don't get to see very many, but I see a few.
You do see a few. Good. Apparently, if you click gallery view, Jim, you might be able to see more than just yourself.
Oh my gosh.
A couple of people have a message to let us know that.
You are brilliant. I'm so glad. Thank you.
That's not
it's
me.
Nice
that's
to
others.
see you guys. I'm scanning now. I'm scanning again. I love it. Thank you. Thank you.
So there's a few questions over in the chat on all of this.
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe let's try to get some of these questions now, and then we'll talk about the last topic. Okay.
Yes, perfect.
Okay.
So there's a question about is there a decision-making process for opening the sanctuary or chapel for private prayer, recognizing it may not be soon given the number of COVID cases Arizona is experiencing?
Erica, can I defer that question to you?
Sure. Actually, I think I can probably take several of them. So as we look at this potential sacrament thing, being able to have Eucharist, that is part of the consideration, potentially having some times when 10 people or less could be in private prayer in the sanctuary in some designated areas, so we don't have to clean the whole place every time. But so we're looking into that. So that will come down the pike. Then there's a question about, yes, the max size per governor's order is no larger than 10. That is correct. That's phase one. The time we're talking about right now that this committee of Jim Rector's has done the work on is for phase 2, when we're up to 50 people. So all of these plans are for when we can gather in groups of 50. There's another question of, will the services continue to be live streamed for those who still might not be able to attend in person? Absolutely. That's a guarantee. We will continue on in some form or fashion, having the online worship available.
Erica, just be careful with the word guarantee. It's our intention.
It's our intention. Absolutely. I will personally hold the two lengths of cord together so that we can make sure so that can happen. Just a note of appreciation. It's hard to be a part, but I'm so appreciative of how thoughtful and cautious our leadership and bishop have been. Thank you. Let's see. Yep, another one about that. Is it possible? Yeah. Is it possible to come to the grounds of St. Barnabas to pray? Yep. And Sky, yeah, this is being recorded. Sky says, back on June 28th, Erica said. So I better be cautious. You're right. I get a little ambitious, don't I? So anybody else? Oh, and it's Bill Simons is 17819. Hey, there we go. Thank you, Bill. Any other comments that you want to add to the chat here, folks on this topic of regathering.
Jim Rector, is there anything I've left out that you think we need to communicate?
Oh, hold on one sec. Just asked you to unmute, Jim, and I think you can unmute yourself. There we go.
Okay. Yep, there we go. So yeah, no, I think you covered it, Jim. It's, you know, it will be a joyful, wonderful time, and it'll be different. And, you know, this maybe is my first appeal. We will need additional greeters and ushers and helpers and so on. So, you know, be prepared if that's something that you are called to do. There certainly will be an opportunity, since we'll need a lot of help to make this all happen. So thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, great. David, anything about walking in the neighborhood I left out that you think we need to add?
No, Jim, I think you covered it very well.
Thank you. All right, good.
There is a question here of how many people attend our normal Sunday worship services.
I have that. Let me see if I can get it, if I have the document up. Do you have it in your head, Erica?
Our average Sunday attendance is like 498. That's over 4 services, and you know, kind of factors in our high season and our low season, summer to winter. We are intending, Jim's committee has determined that there will be a kind of survey before we start regathering about how likely is it for you to come back to church, you know, early, so that we kind of have a bit of a count, knowing how many to accommodate. We know there will be many that still have health uncertainties that will mean they want to wait to return. And so when we have that count, so when you get that survey, be sure and fill it out so that we have all the data we need to be able to accommodate those who feel safe coming back when it's time.
Let me add to that, during the summer and the early fall, our worship attendance is a lot less than the 500 average. So we, you know, if we can begin sometime in the next 2 or 3 months, we won't be trying to accommodate 500 people. It'll be more like
Maybe like
200 or something like that, right?
So.
Okay.
There's a question about how many folks come to the live streaming services. I haven't looked at that data recently, but I think there's at least, it's sort of an average of like 220 to 250 individual devices log in to view us, which could be, I think that kind of hits our average Sunday attendance, considering couples and families and things like that. I think that's the last time I looked.
That jives with me.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So next major topic.
Mm-hmm.
We're good. All right. So this is by far and away the most difficult topic to talk about, and I don't even know how to name it. I've named it the racial crisis of our time. I'm not sure that's the best name. I said earlier I'd come back to the weariness. This topic is so very painful, and so it's so very challenging. As I've said, when I start to try to talk about it, I struggle for the words, and by the way, that means I get tired just trying to find the right words to talk about this. And when you realize, if you take 3 steps back, the world is weary from COVID-19. All the brain research that I'm aware of indicates that when there's a major change, people enter into fear and loss and doubt and uncertainty and great anxiety. And they go to their, what's called the reptilian brain, which is their feeling reactionary parts, and just get tired and get skeptical and then get angry and then get resentful. And because the world is changing, it's taking things away from them. I mean, surely I'm not saying something anybody doesn't know. Then to add this level of change to that, to be already in that place, and then to have the lid taken off of a significant challenge in our society, and our American society, and the world, and to try to figure out how that backs into the work of the church on top of COVID-19 is too much. I just like us all to be able to look at each other and say it's too much. And part of the reason to say that is to not expect much of yourself and not expect much of others. To realize all of us are deeply challenged and struggling to make sense of these times. And frankly, before all this, St. Barnabas decided to do a $7 million Welcoming the Neighborhood project. And that was 5 years in the making, 5 years of And so we've just been bombarded. And to be able to allow the truth of that for one another and to make space for one another in the midst of a very, very, very troubling time. And by the way, forgive me this, but when anyone says very, 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 I think, well, they're just being emotional. I'm not. It's the project was very challenging. COVID-19 is very challenging. And on top of that, the racial crisis is very challenging. It's real that we're in deeply troubled, difficult times. And so, as one whose role is to help lead us through this, I want to now try to invite us to our thoughtful self. And one of the great challenges, as I understand, for leadership is that dependent upon temperament and et cetera, we feel things deeply. And we have great passion for things, especially in the church, especially our work in the church, and the importance of connecting with people at a feeling level and an emotional level and a passionate level. That's really important. And leadership needs to not be reacting from the feeling state and not be reacting from the passionate state, and move towards the more thinking parts, and particularly what I like to call the spiritual intuition, to be guided by our thinking parts, and especially be guided by our prayerful, intuitive, and spiritual parts. And so part of what this, so I want to back us away and invite us to, first of all, to keep focused on the why. Why are these things happening with respect to us? Not what's happened to us, but why our response? So why did we initiate the Welcoming the Neighborhood? Because our mission is to make disciples. And our grounds and our buildings needed a long needed love to continue our mission of making disciples. And because we're at a place where we can't make more disciples, we're maxed out. And so the Welcoming the Neighborhood initiative is really a growth initiative to allow us to make more disciples. That's our mission. And that's the why behind that. Now, with respect to COVID-19, it might seem obvious, but it's important to, someone commented on this, to remember our response. Why is this our response? To stay safe. Why is all this be taken away from us? Because we're going to stay safe. And especially the St. Barnabas community. I mean, I'm looking at a screen of people that the average age might be 70. And we are vulnerable. I'm 69. We're vulnerable. My 4 children bombard me with telling me, stay home, Dad, stay home, Dad, stay home, Dad. My oldest son just sent me an article in the news of how Maricopa County is the poster child for the world of how not to respond to COVID-19. Dad, stay home. And so the why behind all of this is that we would be safe. And remember something, you're not just being safe for yourself, you're being safe for everybody else. And that's the why behind that. Now we come to the racial crisis of our time, and I need to back away another few steps for you and share something with you that I don't know if I've ever shared this publicly. Some of the staff know this about me. But when we began the listening initiative 3 years ago, this topic was deeply in my soul. And frankly, I had carried it daily for years. And because of our commitment and my commitment at St. Barnabas that all are welcome, and because of our commitment and my commitment not to take us into partisan politics, especially in the pulpit, I did not know how for us to address this topic and not betray those values and those commitments. And so I struggled with it for years, like, I don't know, 3 to 5 years on a daily basis. And then we came up with the listening initiative, which on the one hand, since the civil rights movement, and Bishop Curry says this, on the one hand, we've made some great progress. And it's really important to honor that progress and people who've worked tirelessly for decades on this issue. It's really true. On the other hand, we have a long way to go. And we're not where we want to be. And part of what I observed when I carried this for years was that I just saw people lobbying their pain at each other. Going back now to the work of leadership, I see a society in which we're venting our pain, we're divided, and we don't know how to talk to each other. And which really means we don't know how to listen to each other. And so we're not making progress. Part of what we have to look at is to say, if what we've been doing is not giving us the results we want, what could we do differently? How could we do it differently so that we would get a different result? And so that's what led to the listening initiative. And it got off to a great start, and I fully intended it to carry on, and then other things came into our life and short-circuited that. So on the foundation of that comes this horrifying tragedy of the death of George Floyd, and for the whole world to see. And that took the lid off for us to realize that's not a unique experience. And so there's a great question mark around racism in general, and especially racism in our policing, and what that means to us as a society and how we need to respond to it. And I want to say, I want us all, look at the faces on your screen. We're all going to be uncomfortable with this. We need to be willing to be uncomfortable. One of the things you learn as a young preacher in your homiletics course is they'll tell you, sometimes your job is to comfort the afflicted, and sometimes your job is to afflict the comforted. In Robert's sermon this morning, actually, the text Robert used was about a prophet afflicting the people because God wanted to do it differently than they wanted it to be done. And so this is a topic that's going to afflict us. It's a topic that's going to offend us. It's a topic that we're going to find ourselves reacting to. And we're going to hear things we don't want to hear. We're going to say things we're uncomfortable saying. And I was talking with a friend of mine about this, a friend who knows St. Barnabas well. He said, Jim, If there's any church in the world that can do this, it's St. Barnabas. That fabric of the community of that church, the commitment of that church to all are welcome. The prayer and spirituality of that church, the commitment of that church to serving the needs of the world. If there's any church in the world that can enter the troubled waters, can enter the discomfort, can make room for the person who thinks dramatically differently than I think about this, if there's any church in the world that can do this, it's St. Barnabas. And Jim, your job is to keep doing the same thing, leading your church. And by the way, forget what he said. I'm telling you my job. Your job, my job is to lead us forward in all are welcome. Now I want you to hear me. All are welcome and their opinions are welcome. We need to make room to hear one another's thoughts. We need to make a space that's safe for all of us to share our thoughts. And by the way, we're going to hear things that we don't like. We're going to hear things that offend us. We're going to hear, it's likely, we're going to hear things that cause us pain. That's likely. And we're going to keep loving each other. And we're going to keep listening to each other. And we're going to keep making room for each other and find our way forward as disciples, carrying on Jesus's work. You hear me say it, if not every sermon, every other sermon, the whole human family. If I said it differently today, I'd say one human family. People say to me, what's the goal of discipleship? One human family, one with God. That's the mission. And so it's our time, whether we like it or not, it's our time to respond to what's happening around us with who we are. And so for the first, by the way, let me say, nothing that we do at St. Barnabas limits what all of us can do as individuals. So we've always said this. So on the one hand, we don't enter into politics that might divide us at St. Barnabas. On the other hand, many of our members are very politically active. One of our members ran for the U.S. Senate. One of our members was the chair of the Democratic Party. I tell you what, actually, years ago when Ruth Ann Mulvihill was at St. Barnabas, Trish Rifo was senior warden. She was married to the chair of the Democratic Party, and Ruth Ann was on John McCain's campaign for U.S. Senator. You know, John McCain's a Republican, right? I mean, Ruth Ann was the junior warden and Trish was the senior warden, and there we were. So we can all continue to be active in whatever way we feel led and inspired and want to be active as Jesus' disciples. Nothing that we do as a church limits that for us. So I say to everyone, be involved where you feel led to be involved and where you think you're called to be involved. And then as a community, how can we hear from one another and learn, listen to one another and learn from one another and come out of that with a St. Barnabas response to this, what's happening in our world. And I'm not quite sure exactly how to say this, but make room for us to introduce thoughtfully in the pulpit responses to what's happening. So for 15 years, I have asked all of our preachers to be as conservative as they can possibly be around these kinds of issues, not to bring them into the pulpit. I'd like us all to grasp this is not a political issue, it's a human issue. This is not a political issue, it's a spiritual issue, long before it's a political issue. It's a human issue and it's a spiritual issue. I'm going to come to, in a minute, to tell you things that help us think about it that way. It's a human issue and it's a spiritual issue. And again, if there's a church where we can bring this into the pulpit, where our preachers can do this in a thoughtful, careful way to keep identifying just like a prophet would identify, and just like a prophet would discomfort or afflict the comforted, our preachers can bring it into the pulpit and say to us, how are we going to respond to this? What's going on in our world and how are we going to respond? And so as we listen to one another, I also want us to make room for our preachers. And by the way, if one of our preachers gets too far out over her or his skis, I'm sure you'll let us know, and that'll be just fine. Okay, all right. So so our initial response, I've talked with the staff several times and the clergy, and I've talked with members, and I've been reading more than I've read in a long time, and I've been attending seminars, and so hang on, let me get my right paper. I want to share with you how our initial response, what it wants to look like in terms of as a community. So we want to build on the methodology and the the value of the listening initiative. So we want to build on that and try to create some small group opportunities. We were going to launch this July the 12th, but our bishop is doing a diocesan-wide worship service on July 12th. So we won't be doing our worship service. We'll be following the diocesan worship service July 12th. So July 19th, it's our hope to start a series of small group gatherings. And I'm not sure if they're going to be 4 to 6 weeks long. And I'm not sure what size the groups will be just yet. We're working on it. But there are several things we're going to use as a resource. One of them is a series of videos put out by our presiding bishop, the Most Reverend Michael Curry. It's an excellent series of videos that'll be a good starting place for us. Secondly, and really I think the pivotal place, and when I talked earlier about this being a human issue and a spiritual issue, are the questions at the end of our baptismal covenant. So forgive me if this bores you, but I'm on page 304 of the Book of Common Prayer. And I would encourage you starting today to reflect on these questions. So will you continue in the apostles' teaching and fellowship, in the breaking of bread and in the prayers? The answer, of course, is I will with God's help, we will. That's the easy question. Just to let you know, that's the easy question. Will you persevere in resisting evil? Racism is a spiritual issue. It's evil. To the degree that it exists, it's evil. Will you persevere in resisting evil? And whenever you fall into sin, repent and return to the Lord. Now, I need to be careful here because we have some more work to do, but I don't understand this as just a personal issue. Will you, whenever you fall into sin, repent and return to the Lord? On the one hand, it's personal. On the other hand, evil is systemic. So those of you who follow my Lord's Prayer meditations, the last word in the gospel in the Lord's Prayer is evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever, amen, is appended. Every scholar I know, that was appended by the early community to the Lord's Prayer. In Matthew and Luke, where it exists, the last word in the Lord's Prayer is evil. And my understanding of that is that it points to the problem of an incomplete creation. So think about the Lord's Prayer. If God's name were hallowed, if the kingdom of God had come, if the will of God was being done, there'd be no evil. And all of those petitions are asking God to do something. God has not finished the work of creation, and where it's not finished, there's evil, and all of us participate in it. So part of what's happening is we're being invited to ask ourselves, to what extent is racism evil, and to what extent am I a part of it, and to what extent are its fingers all throughout our society? Because the kingdom of God has not yet arrived. The will of God is not yet being done. And if you're asking the question, yes, I've gone to preaching. We're not yet hallowing the name of God all throughout the creation. So we need to back away from the blame game and the shame game and the guilt game and realize our baptismal covenant. Will you persevere in resisting evil? And ask ourselves, how's that question relevant to the racial crisis of our time? So the next question, will you proclaim by word and example the good news of God in Christ? That's also easy compared to the next one. Will you seek and serve Christ in all persons, loving your neighbor as yourself? Help us, Jesus. What does it mean in this time to seek and serve Christ in all persons, loving our neighbor as ourselves? Let me ask you something. Do you like it when somebody else tells you what love feels like? For you, if they're telling you, well, this is what love feels like to you. You know what happens when someone says it to me? I'll tell you what love feels like to me. The Black community is telling us it does not feel like love. Would you hear us? Would you listen to what it feels like to us? Would you listen to us say, this is what love would feel like. This is what love would look like. This is what love would do. Now, and by the way, the starting place is believe that that's what they really think and feel. You don't necessarily have to agree with it, but believe that that's their story. That's their report. This is what it feels like to us. Love would look like this to us. It doesn't have to dictate anything. It just names something for us to hear, to listen to, and to hear it. Last question in the covenant. Will you strive for justice and peace among all people and respect the dignity of every human being? Again, the African American community is saying to us, it does not feel like justice to us. It does not feel like our dignity, and I would like to add our sacredness, is being respected. Again, the starting place is to listen. Could we listen to their report of what it feels like to them and their experience? And it's likely to discomfort us. It's likely to afflict us. It's likely to make us feel very uncomfortable. It's likely to invite us into all kinds of afflictive emotions. And can we allow ourselves that? And again, work our way through to a thoughtful response, and not just get stuck in the emotions. One of the things Bishop Curry says, and this is very meaningful to me, the goal is not to get stuck in the past. Whatever may have happened in the past, the goal is to learn from it to get a different future. We can't ignore the past, but no, let's don't get stuck in it. And let's don't get stuck in the negative feelings of the past. Let's move forward. How do we work together to move forward to get the future that we want? And so I really think these last 5 questions in the baptismal covenant, the video series we have from Bishop Curry, we have a wonderful book from Richard Rohr that the title is it's a little book. What will we do with evil? It's a great question. And frankly, the Lord's Prayer, as I've indicated, I think the Lord's Prayer has some great wisdom for us. And then other texts. There's other things we're working on, but we're trying to put together a small group curricular program for us using the baptismal covenant, Bishop Curry's videos, this little book from Richard Rohr, the Lord's Prayer, and some other scriptures. And And again, I wanna say it's what's important to me is that the starting place is to do our best to listen to the African American community, to listen to them, and then listen to one another. And yet we're starting with listening to our Black sisters and brothers, and listen to one another. And we're designing a 4 to 6 week curriculum, and then as we do that, we'll see what matures and what comes next. I've already indicated that we can all be involved in whatever action we want to be involved in between now and then. There's lots of reading lists available for us. The Diocesan Anti-Racism Committee has a wonderful reading list. And they also have a list of 75 things white people can do, I think is what it's titled. Actually, is that on, Erica, is that on their website, or did I get that somewhere else?
It's all over the internet if you Google it, but I do believe it is on the diocesan webpage for the Anti-Racism Committee as well. Okay.
So there are lots of resources for us to we're not just limited to this, what we're trying to do at St. Barnabas. Each of us can find things to read and things to do and things to participate in. I've probably never been more weary, and I've probably never been more hopeful. I just can't tell you how what an opportune time I think it is for the church. I think the church, capital C, and I think the Church of St. Barnabas, an opportune time it is for us to in a sense, grow in a significant way as a community in our response to the needs of the world and what it means for us to be disciples of Jesus, and what it means for us to resist evil, to seek and serve Christ in all persons, to love our neighbor as ourselves, to strive for justice and peace among all people and the sacred dignity of every human being. This is a time where we, I think, can advance in being followers of Jesus, and I'm very hopeful in that regard. So I feel like I just preached 6 sermons. So are there any responses or questions, or especially any concerns about what you've heard me say?
There's a few comments in the chat so far, just to point to, I think the instinct to have Judy says, I think the instinct to have a listening training and ministry is good, and we should follow through online. Joanne says, we're going to make mistakes, but with forgiveness and compassion, we can learn and grow and embrace all. Really appreciate that.
Yes.
Anne, I just have Anne, says, I think we should stress expressing our opinions with civility without compromising our stands. I think that's true. Note from Bob Wood, Jim, when addressing the readers and ushers, etc., sometime back you stated that just as important as not offending is not being easily offended. Words that seem appropriate to our current situation.
Good.
Thanks, Bob. Let's see. Alice asked, I presume these small groups will have to be online, and perhaps later there can be live ones for those not using computer. Indeed, they will be online groups. Kim says it is tiring and difficult, but it's time. Absolutely. So liminal time. It's tiring and difficult, but liminal time, Kim says. So any other comments or feedback folks want to enter, or this too, if it's a little too much for chat, if you can unmute yourself and make a comment, and we'll just try and sort of manage people accidentally talking on top of each other if we want to do that.
Yes.
Go ahead.
You didn't answer the last part of the question. I asked if there would be live ones for those. The people that I'm writing to next, they do not have a computer. I want to, when I write to them, I want to assure them that sometime in the future they'll be able to participate in such meetings, even if they don't have a computer.
I don't know yet how we can have gatherings up to 10 people. So that
Yeah.
is possibly.
It's- Yeah, I mean, these are people probably that could benefit from these discussions too. You know,
Yeah.
they're older.
We'll explore that. We'll explore
Yeah,
that. For
thank you.
now, it's
Thank you.
we're going to have to do them all online. But we'll
Right, I
explore that.
understand. I just want to be able to assure them that when I talk about that
Mhm.
possibly in the future it'll be available live.
Right. Thanks, Alice.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Just so you all note, I took Jim off of Spotlight Speaker, and if you want to be tracking who is speaking, you can, instead of having gallery view, you can choose speaker view, and the person who is speaking will pop up on the screen, I believe. So.
I saw the question, will there be resources for these materials? The Richard Rohr book, we're going to purchase it. And then if you want to reimburse us for it, you can, but we're going to make it available for everybody and make sure we have enough. The Bishop Curry videos, that's a Church Next video series that we have access to at St. Barnabas, and I'm not sure we can make it. We'll play it in our groups. There's 4 6 or 7 minute videos. So I'm not yet sure that we can make them available for you all to see them separately from when we're in a group, but I'd like us to be able to do that. We'll check that out. And then
I
all
think
the
we
rest,
can.
there's nothing to purchase. So
I think we can. It's just a matter of kind of coordinating that effort so that people can kind of sign up for a Church Next account through us, and then we'll connect them all.
okay.
Another question was, is there a need for iPads or Chromebooks for folks to use? I don't know about that, Joanne. I think it's it might be kind of a combined matter of both needing a device and possibly needing internet too. But if there is a need for that, maybe that you know about for someone, maybe you can let us know, and there might be folks that want to try and help. There's a question here about, since I was not able to attend the listening training in groups, is there a place where I can get myself up to speed quickly? Not yet, but there's gonna be. That's Erica overpromising again. But yes, we will try and put all of those resources into one place.
Erica, I'm not sure we can do that because we don't own them all, but we'll make some resources available in the curricula that we're using for the groups.
Right.
We'll do that. And we'll revisit some of that. It'd be good for all of us to be reminded of some of that.
Right.
So
Right.
There's a
Jim
lot
and Erica.
to be worked out with respect to this. So
Yeah. Phyllis, you had a question?
No, actually, I have a comment,
Oh,
which
okay.
in following some of these links on the diocesan website, they go to the presiding bishop's office's website. And there are many of these videos. I don't know if they're the ones that you're referencing, but the presiding bishop's task force has been working on this for a long time.
Mhm.
And as of 2017, had been putting a lot of stuff on that website. So I have not looked at those videos yet, but I've certainly read a lot of the information that's on that website. So I just wanted to make sure that you guys are aware of that.
thank you,
Yeah.
Phyllis.
Yeah, thank you.
Very
That's very helpful. Next.
Oh, this is Gail.
Hi, Gail.
Hi, I wanted to say, besides Jim's inspiring 6 sermons this morning, the presiding bishop's sermon on May 31st, called the Balm of Gilead, was one of the most inspiring sermons I've ever heard. And I just wanted to refer it to the folks here today.
Yeah, that's a great sermon, Gail. Thank you. That's a very helpful sermon from the presiding bishop.
Excellent.
And his article in the Washington Post is also very helpful.
Yeah.
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 Thank you.
Mm-hmm. There's a question about which Rohr book. What's the title of the book again, Jim?
What do we do with evil?
You want to hold it up so people can see it? There you go.
It's about 100 pages.
All right.
And
Cool.
by the way, I wish Richard were here so I could tell him this. Sometimes I love what he writes, and sometimes I don't have the foggiest idea what the hell he's saying. It's a very helpful book, I think.
Other comments?
Hi, Erica.
Yeah, Judy.
I guess I'm still confused on the direction that the church is taking as far as opening. what I heard is that if you have groups of, when we get to phase 2 and we have groups of 50 or more, we will then decide whether we're going to meet at church.
No, Judy, I'm sorry. What I intended to say was, once phase 2 is available to us, we will gather for worship in groups of at most 50 people. The largest gathering we can have is 50 people. So when we gather for worship, it'll be 50. We'll make seats available for 50.
So there'll be a sign up system to do that, Judy, and we'll be offering more services each week, and possibly kind of have to be on a bit of a rotation depending. We may not be able to go to church every week. Maybe we'll go every other week so that there's room for everyone to come. And so there'll be lots of communication about it when we get closer to that place.
It'll be very clear.
So the state is saying that we shouldn't be meeting.
Right. It's not about the state, it's about the bishop. We're following the bishop, not the state.
Okay.
Well, although the bishop is using the Department of Health Services tracking, so waiting for a 14-day decline of new cases, and then we can execute phase 2 and go to 50-person groups.
Yeah,
So.
because I know with my sister's funeral service, we are able to meet at a church, and I know the Catholic churches also are having meetings and services of some sort. So it's very confusing when you have different denominations doing different things,
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
yet I can see both sides. I can see where we might be in trouble if we get back too soon.
Yeah.
So Judy, hang on. I'm going to come back to that, but I've seen people are leaving, and I meant to do this earlier. I want to do it now. Robert closed his sermon. But by the way, it's the first time I heard it was this morning, with what I think is an outstanding exercise for us to pray the prayer from Bishop Curry that's in our bulletin, have some silence, and then bring into that silence your favorite prophets and the prophets you don't ever want to hear from again. I'd like to tell you, I think that is a very wise exercise. If we only hear what we like to hear, we'll never learn what we don't know. So let me say it again, to spend some time praying the prayer. It's in our bulletin from Bishop Curry, following that with some silence, then bringing into the silence the prophets we love and the prophets we don't ever want to hear again. I love it. Great exercise. Okay. So now, yes, Diana.
I would just like to ask a question that maybe it's for me, but maybe it will help others. I've written a chat and I don't know how to send it to the chat thing.
Hit enter. Press enter.
Oh, enter. How creative is that? Okay, thank you, Erica.
So,
of course, my love.
Judy, I want to come back to Judy's question for all of us. I think it's relevant. Different groups have different responses to what's happening. Our bishop is guiding our diocese, and we are following our bishop's direction. And as I said earlier, our bishop convened a task force that includes medical professionals and others, spend a lot of time thinking about and exploring. And by the way, they explored churches all over the country, and especially Episcopal churches, as they came up with their criteria for how we could regather. And so I understand that the Roman Catholics are doing it, and I understand other churches besides them are gathering, but we're following the counsel of our bishop. And without meaning to be arrogant or dismissive or whatever, it would seem to me that a more conservative approach to this is extremely warranted in Maricopa County. So I respect that people are gathering, and I personally would choose not to do that. I would choose to be more conservative and more cautious, given what's happening. So,
well, I worked for Maricopa County years ago, and at the time in disease control, And at the time, it was a wonderful experience. They did a wonderful job, and I'm very disappointed right now that they don't seem to be working with the state.
Who doesn't seem to be?
Maricopa County.
Oh.
You never hear of their health leadership on any television or any comments. They don't seem to be involved, and that bothers me because we are one of the second largest counties in the United States, and so makes me sad. You know, it makes me sad. And maybe they're just not, you know, the news people aren't talking to the right people. I don't know.
Don't know, Judy.
But anyway.
I have a follow-up question on this, and it's something I thought from as soon as I heard the bishop's plan, I thought there's going to be a plan that's hard to keep implemented. And I think that the bishop's going to be under a lot of pressure. I happen to think it's the right plan myself, but there's going to be so much pressure to open things up. What do you think is going to be sort of, you know, especially the next, say, 3 to 4 weeks, where we're undergoing this spike, and there's going to be a lot of intensity. Any thoughts on that?
What do you mean, Margin? I don't understand. The question is not clear to me.
Well, what I'm trying to get at is the bishop going to be able to hold to this plan with the 14-day consecutive decreasing? In other words, what they're trying to do is get ahead of the curve, right? Is the bishop going to be able to hold to that? You know,
Margin, I thank you for the question.
You know how shy and retiring I am. So
no, I love it. It's a great question. It's a great question, and I love the question because, you know what? I don't have to answer it.
You don't.
I'm grateful for a question I do not have to. That is the bishop's decision, not mine, and I'm grateful that it's not my decision. Yeah. I will remind you that the bishop, this has gone longer than she expected.
Yeah, I'm sure it has.
Making pastoral allowance for us to administer communion of one kind. So we'll be getting back to you about that. Yeah. Then with regard to I just have no idea whether or not the circumstances will cause her to change her criteria. I kind of doubt it, but that's her call, not mine. So.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate you taking the lob there.
Father Jim, can I ask you a question? This is John.
Hi, John.
Hi, I used to always, one of the things I love coming to your services on Sunday online. I love a lot of everything you guys do, including I'm glad that the once a month meeting, the silent day is back. What about going back to the home? When we used to go every month and feed the homeless. Any talk about that coming back again in the future? I think they're a little bit higher risk. That's maybe the highest risk right now.
Yeah.
But.
Well, frankly, that's where we would be following the governor at the very least of no gatherings of more than 10. It's not possible to do that and manage the crowd. And,
I understand.
And even if it weren't for the governor, there's just no way to manage the crowd around that of masks and too many people and all of that. So, John, I think that's a ways away. In the meantime, we're doing food drives and other kinds of things.
Yep.
But right now, I just don't see how we can go out and feed the homeless for a good while. So I appreciate that matters to you. Thanks. And it does matter to a lot of us. So we're trying to find alternative ways to serve hungry people. So.
Excellent. Thank you.
Other comments? I do.
Can I at least put in a positive comment here?
Of course.
Feedback. You know, I like to do this too. I just wanted to let the clerical staff know that this food drive has turned out to be a kind of a recruiting thing. Somebody I've been trying to get to come to St. Barnabas. They're actually the ones who introduced me to St. Barnabas, but they've been very concerned about attending this parish. but he's been kind enough to help me when I couldn't get down there for the food drive. And it was such a positive experience. I think I'm getting them there. So they have been very impressed.
Well done, Marja. That's awesome. Sandy, did you have a question?
Well, it was about the homeless, feeding the homeless. That are we still making sandwiches?
Yes.
Yeah.
We're still doing that.
And also, you know, the St. Vincent de Paul is closed. And so what happens is people line up in the heat and either get a brown bag or sometimes a restaurant will give them food, you know, and send servings over. And I have permission to make cookies for them because but I'm not there. I'm in California right now. Because I have a baking at home license, one of those things, but I bet the church could do it too. What they would like is treats. You know, these people standing in the heat and then they get a sandwich, but if there were a treat, it would be a big deal. I'm just saying, maybe that's something that could happen at some point.
Cool.
Thank you, Sandy.
Okay. Anybody else? I do want to respond. Joanne Berg had a question further up in the chat, going back to the comments about our listening program. Will we also be using relevant texts by minority writers as we go forward in our program?
So our presiding bishop is a minority and we're following his videos. And then one of the, I just don't know exactly all the materials we'll be using. I've outlined, I've said the ones we're going to use as foundational. So the baptismal covenant and the bishop's videos, and then that's foundational. And then we'll have some text, have some excerpts from Richard Rohr, and I actually recommend reading Richard Rohr's book. So the Diocesan Task Force on Anti-Racism has a magnificent reading list, and I commend that. A 4 to 6 week program, what we're starting with, can only incorporate so much. So as that matures, and right now we're still working on it. So I'm working on it. So as that matures, we might be able to include references to other materials. I just don't know how much we're going to be expecting of people to do. So, but again, the foundational, one of the foundational components is the presiding bishop's videos. So.
All right. Anything else, team? Looks like the chat has slowed down. We'll get the presiding bishop's prayer put up on our website in a more prominent place so we can experience that outside of Sunday worship. And I think we're good.
I would just like to extend or just express gratitude to you, Jim, and to all of the staff at St. Barnabas for really taking on what I think is probably the most difficult question of these times, and that is, what is the nature of leadership during these times? What is leadership, good or healthy leadership, supposed to look like? And even for me and my own family, trying to evaluate and spend time introspectively to get right down to the nature of things. It really just kind of turns life and our expectations of what leaders are supposed to be kind of on its ear. And I appreciate you taking this transition just so head on.
Thank you. Who's speaking?
Daniel.
Daniel who?
Hughes.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for your comment. I appreciate it very much.
I think we're good, boss.
You guys all good? I'm I'm not seeing any rotten fruit coming my way, so that's a good thing.
We're
All
good.
right. All right. You're all, thank you so much. Thanks for all the love and support. And again, we're just on our way to new ground, being led by the Spirit. And I continue to be excited and hopeful. Thank you and bless you. Thanks,
Amen.
Erica.
Thanks, Jim.
Of course.
Amen.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Jim.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
All right. You guys go have a good lunch, and we love y'all. Happy Sunday.